Again, thank you so much for your patience on that. My apologies. Thank you for joining us for our session today on how your workplace culture influences employee retention. A shout out to our Facebook Live audience. I believe you are there now. The webinar is part of a 6-part series on workforce-related topics supported by Gordon Food Service. GFS is a great partner of WRA's with valuable business solutions for you to consider. The webinar is hosted by the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, dedicated to the success of the food service and hospitality industry. WRA serves as your primary resource for regulatory guidance, training opportunities, and solutions to relevant challenges. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our panel. Feel free to submit questions using the chat box or the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your screen, and the webinar will be recorded and sent to you later this week. I will now introduce our panel, who represents a diverse market, but all share the same philosophy that you're going to hear about today on workplace culture. We are truly fortunate to have with us today Jeannie Carpenter, owner of Firefly Coffee House and Artisan Cheese. Jeannie and her husband Uriah purchased Firefly Coffee House in 2017 in Oregon, Wisconsin. As professionals in the food and IT industries, neither had any experience owning a restaurant. The result was a fresh approach to running a 5,000 square foot cafe. Today, they employ 27 people, 11 full-time, paying full benefits, living wages, vacation, and living allowances. They've increased revenue by 300% by building a dedicated team who view working at Firefly Coffee House as a career. We also have with us today Chef Paul Bartolotta, owner and co-founder at the Bartolotta Restaurants. The Bartolotta Restaurants is a nationally recognized restaurant and catering organization co-founded by 4-time nominated and 2-time James Beard award-winning Chef Paul Bartolotta and his late brother, Joe Bartolotta. Since the opening of its flagship restaurant, Ristorante Bartolotta dal 1993, the Bartolotta Restaurants Group was grown to become one of the premier culinary brands in the greater Milwaukee region, offering first-class service and cuisine across a portfolio of 17 one-of-a-kind restaurants and catering facilities, including fine dining, upscale casual, upscale food hall, and quick casual concepts. We also have Chris Larson, owner at Beckett's Restaurant and Wagner Market. Chris's passion for providing the freshest and local products is a catalyst for opening Beckett's Waterfront Dining and Wagner Market. Chris also supports Growing Oshkosh, a local sustainable Oshkosh-based urban farm and garden, and treasurer of the WRA Board of Directors. And lastly, Erin Baranis, owner of Parthenon's Euros and Yips Yogurt Chips. Erin has worked in the restaurant industry for 17 years. She co-owns Parthenon's Euros, an iconic 50-year-old restaurant in Madison that specializes in in-home house-made, Euros. Erin also co-founded Yips Yogurt Chips and sits on the WRA Board of Directors. She was named 40 Under 40 by In Business Magazine, and this summer, QSR Magazine named Erin one of 28 young leaders to watch in the US. So thank you all for being here, and we're just really excited to get started. Jeannie, we're gonna kind of start with you had mentioned we had all met before in a pre-call, and you were saying, you've been a restaurateur for just 4 years, and but you've had a lot of successes in this area. So I'm going to kind of let you jump in and share a little bit of what works for you.
Okay, thanks for having me on the panel. I'm the newbie here, and it's interesting because I get that from a lot of folks in the industry of you're a newbie, and I think that's been a blessing for us because we didn't know how things usually worked in the restaurant industry, right? My husband, I worked in specialty artisan cheeses for 15 years, buying, selling, retailing, marketing. And my husband still has his job. He's a software architect, an IT professional. So we both had professional jobs our whole lives, right? So when we bought the coffee house, my immediate sense was to treat these folks as professionals. The folks that we sort of inherited that came with the business, right? They're making $12 an hour. They were all working second jobs, and they were tired all of the time. And so I ended up, Uriah and I met, we figured out the budget. I met with my folks one-on-one, and I said, what do you need to make per hour to quit your second job? And they all kind of looked at me, and I said, I want the best 8 hours of your day. I want you to go home and sleep. I want you to go home and spend time with your family. And then when you come in and work for me for 8 hours, I want you to have energy. I want you to be happy to be here. I want you to do a good job. And so in 2017, that number was $14 an hour. So we raised everyone to $14 an hour, and everybody quit their second jobs. That was really the start of building a team that when I inherited, when we bought the business, it came with 8 employees, and now I have 27. And I also work full time at the business, and we have 27 employees because we're that busy. I just hired 4 more people in the last 2 weeks, and it turns out our starting wage now is $16 an hour. It turns out when you are paying living wages and full benefits, you have no problem finding staff. So I sort of came into this by accident, because that's how I had always lived my life, right? You go to a job, you have benefits, you have a good salary, you negotiate, you go back and forth. The second thing that we did, when we bought the business, we really knew that the way to retain, so you can get good employees with good wages, but to retain them, you need full benefits. And so we started working on the cash flow spreadsheet and the budgets, because we knew we had to offer benefits, especially health insurance. And it took us a year. It took us a year to get to that. And we also had a very public raising of prices. And we told the public, we are raising our prices 10% because we need to pay for health insurance for our employees. And I want to tell you, we got 0 pushback from our customers, like 0 pushback. So that was initially how we paid for the health insurance for, I think we had 4 employees then taking it. We pay 80% of the premium. They pay 20%. It has a $2,000 deductible. And after that, everything is paid for. We also set up HSA accounts at our local bank for all the employees on health insurance. And we match what they put in there every pay period. So within like 3 months of working for us, they have a couple $1,000s in that HSA account and don't have to worry. So that's sort of my spiel is we've treated people like professionals from the beginning. They have rewarded us end over end. We now have our employees know our customers by name, right? They know what they drink. We've aligned to the door constantly. Our online ordering system is constant. We're very busy, but because I've had people working for me now 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they know they're watching our customers' kids grow up. They know where they go on vacation. They ask them about their parents. And so we have very much solidified our place in the community as the community coffee shop. And that's the last thing I'll say is that's working out well for us, because now we're getting competition, right? So another coffee shop opened just zigzag from us right downtown, opened a few months ago, and we're doing fine. So yeah, that's kind of my spiel is, man, work on those cash flow spreadsheets and figure out how you can pay your employees more and work in benefits, because I don't have the patience or the time to constantly be training new people. It's so much easier. It's so much less stressful for me to have people who have been here long term and know what they're doing and really excel. So the return on investment is worth it.
Thank you, Jeannie. I think that's a perfect segue over to Chris when it comes to training. And Chris has a model really of autonomy with his training, and I'll let Chris jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for coming to chat. This panel met earlier to kind of discuss these things in advance of what we're going to talk about today. And that was fascinating. I mean, I know and like all these people anyway, which is good, but it's a fun thing to sit down and talk about because there's different approaches to the end goal. And the end goal here is, of course, to learn about how we can all do better at hiring and retaining employees, right? So one of the key components that I found across this panel was we all spent a lot of time training folks. What happens after that is different for each of us, but that's great. And I think, oh, Dawn says you can't hear me talking. Can you hear me talking? I see a comment. Erin, Amy, how's it on your end?
I can hear you just fine. I'm
fine.
Good. Well, I don't know what Dawn's talking
can-
about. Sorry, Dawn.
Can somebody else in the audience, if you would please verify that you can hear Chris talking?
I can talk very loud if I need to.
We can hear, yes.
Okay, good. Then I'll just keep going. But
Okay, great. Thank you.
One of the things that we found was paramount to our successes here, because this is a group of people who are not currently having a hard time finding employees necessarily, which is good. And we know that's a little rare. But training is important. And a lot of today will be about specificity in what we all do in our own individual restaurants. And I presume the people watching will take what they want from that and apply it to their own. That's what's good about this format. For me, and I think Erin's going to come up and talk at some point in time about what she does differently, which is great. But what I've always preached in this and what I found work, and for background reference, this is a full service restaurant. So it's not quick service. So there are more components to a degree, and maybe that's why it works for me. But what we do is we have a pretty robust training program. It's 6 days, 6 shifts. And after that, my presumption with my staff is that they are essentially sole proprietors, and they have autonomy to work on their own in this format based on the training and the information we gave them. And I think I mentioned when we were talking about this panel, I haven't once in 20 years had to stop someone from doing something nefarious to the business on purpose, because that's not what people are here for. And what we found is giving, obviously, as Jeannie mentioned, paying people the right amount of money is important also, but being able to work in a place that's fun and that you have some autonomy to do what you think is the right thing to do. And that ties in with working on a team that has a collective goal of making everybody money as a staff and doing something awesome for our guests and our community, so on and so forth. That's worked out great for us. And that I think is a huge thing that I can point to as to why we've been successful both hiring and retaining people. Is that, I mean, people seem to like that. That's good for me. We'll circle back on more in a second. Otherwise, I'll ramble all morning.
Paul, when we had all talked as a group, you were talking about how you can validate the whole idea of you have to be open-minded, even though you're seasoned. You've been doing this for a while, and you kind of the points of why that's so important.
You froze. I missed the end of it. You froze.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I were to tell everybody here that we don't usually have technical difficulties, you probably would never believe me, but I don't know what's going on today. Well, I was just saying that you agree that even as a seasoned operator, that you have to be open-minded when it comes to culture, when it comes to training, when it comes to how you're treating your staff, and what you were maybe doing 10 years ago is not going to work. So if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, it's interesting, a lot of it comes from the evolutionary part of our experience, but clearly, if you want to have an organization or you want to run a business, you've got to first and foremost be a really good listener. Second, I think fundamental to all of it is that engagement, with your people. And I really appreciated Jean's perspective that, she approached it with a completely different perspective than people traditionally who've been in the business a long time. And I've had the great fortune of operating in New York and Chicago and Vegas, but also here in Milwaukee with my brother, and each of them had different realities. So we continue to push ourselves to say, how do we get better at getting better? How do we become good listeners? How do we empower our employees? And fundamentally, when I hear other people say, well, the workforce isn't what it used to be and all that, actually, we have a younger generation that's smarter, more curious, more informed, and they really want to be part of something. So it's up to us to actually get their buy-in. And I guess, the issue was that we talked about in our pre-call was, for me, when I look at people and people are reevaluating our industry. So retention, it's finding the right fit for us to say, here's the job I need, and I'm hiring for that job. Actually asking people and learning what they're good at, what are their strengths, and putting them in positions where they're going to succeed, and then show them the road to grow and advance and develop within your organization. So it is benefits. Absolutely. We've had a very robust, benefits package with employee dining cards so they can dine in our restaurants, which obviously in COVID we temporarily suspended, and we're relaunching that, our employee discount card, all these things to create the one team idea, because we do have a collection of businesses and we want everyone to see, maybe I'm starting in quick casual, then I'll go to a upscale casual dining, and then maybe I'll end up in a fine dining. Maybe we have people that started, we're giving out our service awards, we've reinstituted that, and we have like 80 employees right now that are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25-year employees that have been with us for that long, right? And so all of these things are critical, but you have to realize that we are going to make mistakes, and you can't know it all, and you've got to approach this with the humility that there's always an opportunity to learn. And so when we were talking as a group at our board meeting for WRA, and when we were doing our pre-meeting, what I enjoyed is I'm listening and I'm learning from everyone. And so that's what I took away. So what I'd like to say is these dialogues, I think, are critical because it all helps us, hone in on better communication. Great employees want to work with other great employees. The best way to lose a great employee is to allow or enable a bad employee to stay within your organization and not work with that. Training and development is a real big part of it. And you've got right now, as we're reopening all of our restaurants, it's about rebuilding the trust, because if any of you did any like layoffs, and we did massive layoffs, we were not the jet ski, but we were the big tanker. We went from 960 employees to 12 during COVID, and now we're back up at 700. And as we're hiring, it is rebuilding that trust. It's reinvesting. It's communicating the vision, letting them know that there's an end to this evolutionary period that we're going through. I think these are all points that communication training are critical about retaining people, and for them to feel like, we're in a people business, and we got to focus on the heart of the people, so that these people are feeling like they're part of this family and they're contributing to our culture, and that culture is alive and real. And our values always began with putting our employees before our guests, because unless your employees are happy, they will not. And Jeannie hit it on the head. Like, if your employees are happy, then they're going to make customers happy. And then second is employee happy, and then third is, are we good with our stakeholders and our vendors and our landlords and things like this? Are we investing in our community? And then are we good stewards of the bottom line, so that we can then reinvest in our employees and such?
Thank you, Paul. And that brings us to Erin. And I know Erin is huge on training. She's passionate about training, having processes. So she's going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about that.
Gosh, where do I start with any of this? There's just so much. So many years ago, I came across this book, and it really inspired me. And I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of Kenneth Blanchard. He's a big, proponent of different management strategies, or at least it was different, and it was very radical when he first came out with it. But I love several of his books, excuse me. And one of them, the one that I love the most, is called Well Done. So we came across this many years ago, and we changed our entire management strategy based on this book. And so basically it's kind of goofy, and it's a simple read, but I highly recommend it to anyone who has not read it. But essentially what it talks about is the trainers in SeaWorld, how they get the killer whales to do what they want them to do, because it's not like you can chastise a however many ton killer whale into doing something for you. No, it's going to eat you. And so it talks about the power of praising and also redirecting. So it's been a really important book. Yeah, so it's basically like you catch people doing things right and you redirect negative behaviors in ways that don't demoralize people. So it builds trust, it keeps it fun and friendly, it increases job satisfaction, and it encourages behavior that you do want. So it also talks about like different types of responses. So generally, like back in the day, it was either no response or negative response, right? I mean, when I first started in the restaurant industry, if I didn't hear anything, then I was doing something right. Or if I got yelled at for something, then obviously, okay, now I need to change my behavior. But the best way that we've found to go about this now is to praise that positive behavior. So like catch people doing things right away. Even if it's something small, praise them, let them know that it's awesome, whatever they're doing, and do it in front of people. Now, if you do see them doing something wrong, that's when you redirect it. So first of all, don't do it in front of people because that is demoralizing, right? So if you're going to tell someone, oh, you're doing this wrong. The other thing that we do is something that we call radical responsibility. So if we catch someone doing something wrong, rather than going to them and pointing fingers, we're going to take responsibility for them doing it wrong. And so that could look like something like not measuring meat, right? Because like we measure meat before we put it in a sandwich. Well, if they go and do that wrong or don't do it at all, and this is obviously a really simple, basic example, we would go up to them and say, hey, I'm sorry, let me actually train you on how to do that. So I'm going to retrain them. I'm going to take responsibility for them doing that wrong. And then going forward, I'm going to place the trust in them that they'll know how to do it right. So anyway, a little bit about that. What else do we want to talk about here? Training has been huge for us. So Chris had mentioned that he and I are very similar philosophically, but the way we execute is very different. So we both train extensively, especially in the beginning. So for us, it's not a set amount of time, but it's set tasks. And so those tasks could take a week for you to learn, or it could take up to a month, and it's completely at your own pace. And then after that, we also have like orientation training, initial training. We have Eurostation trainings, we have leader training, 3 different HACCP trainings. We offer all of the serve safe trainings if people want to take it. So essentially, even though we're one little restaurant, it's been important for us to have people be able to do additional learnings and trainings so that they don't stagnate, because that's been a hard thing, is when people are in a position and then they feel like they can't go any further. Well, this allows them, even in one tiny organization, to continue going further. Before I finish my rant, I want to talk about one more thing, and that's communication. So that's absolutely huge. In addition to like the management strategy, the whole whale done management strategy, in addition to very structured training, and then the next one is communication. So for us, communication is huge. We are like overly annoyingly communicative, but it's a beautiful thing. And we expect the same of our staff. So we basically show them how we want them to act, right? So what's been really big for us is having the Homebase app. And I'm sure a lot of you have scheduling apps. For us, we use Homebase in particular. There's a free version, which we started with. We upgraded to the paid version because I like the features, but it's super cheap and it's the best thing ever. So it shows the scheduling. They can change their availability. They can request off, they can get covers or trade shifts or whatever it is. And it's all on the app. And that's been really nice for them and really simple. The other thing is that it has a messaging platform. And so we have many different threads for many different topics, but our 2 main ones are like the entire team thread where they can just communicate back and forth. But the primary one that we always go to is a thread that we call Better Than Yesterday. And so that's sort of our operations thread. And so if there's any sort of communication that needs to happen right away, operations wise, hey, we're making this change, or anything, whatever it is, we'll put it on there. And that has been awesome. And we always tell them, hey, that is where you need to look, right? So we're always like on the same page. That's been big. in addition to pay benefits, that sort of thing. I won't go into that because Jeannie covered it. Okay, end of my rant.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you. So, Jeannie, I know when we had talked prior, you spend a lot of time washing dishes. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, as you can see from my background, this used to be my office. Sadly, this is still my office. We remodeled the kitchen last Christmas time. We made it bigger, we made it better, and now we need more space again. So all the dry storage got out of the back of my kitchen, now to my office, and now that's more production space, right? So yeah, that's my life right now. So I liked Chris's comments on giving people autonomy. So I have one manager, and really the reason manager is in his title is because that was the only way I could get him to come work for me 3.5 years ago if he was the manager. Super, you get to be the manager. The truth is that we're all on equal footing here. I give a lot of autonomy to my staff. They will often come to me and say, you know, what should we do with this? What we should do that? And I'm like, I just say, you guys figure it out. You know the kitchen better than I do. You know the customer flow better than I do. You all figure it out. Now, I know all those things, right? I know the kitchen flow. I can do every job in the place. But when you obviously let your employees make the decisions, they're happier, they're vested. Now, if something doesn't go right, they try to figure out how it goes better next time. In our restaurant, the dishwashing station is right in the middle of it all. Customers can see the dishwasher. It's in between the espresso bar, big area, and then the kitchen. And so I have found that the most effective place for me is to be washing dishes. I can see everything that's going on in the espresso bar. I can see and hear everything that's going on in the kitchen. Customers can see me if they need something. And also, no one wants to do dishes, right? So I'm immediately the hero because I do dishes like 6 or 8 hours a day, off and on, you know, in between things. We finally broke down and we hired a couple high school kids to wash dishes on the weekends, just because I couldn't do it anymore. And oh my God, that is so exciting that I can now, like, you know, make drinks or make food and be a better resource to my staff. But that's what I've done for really the last 4 years. Is I've done a lot of dishes. Obviously I do all the purchasing. I'm here every day. But if you can show your staff that you are there to serve them, it goes a long ways. Even sometimes, I mean, we all do it. We all plant those seeds and let our staff think it's their decision or their idea, right? My background's in marketing, so you get to be pretty good at that. But that's the key. That's why I do a lot of dishes, and it works. It works for us. It works for the team.
Thank you. Another perfect segue, Chris. How about talking about who's number one, that it's really staff?
Yeah, that's I was going to read that regardless of whether you threw that back to me or not. This is I don't mean to, if I sound grumpier at this point in the conversation, this is where I get a little salty with this thing as we keep talking about it. I mean, it's great that we talk about it, but Erin is laughing because she's heard me get all grouchy about it. But yeah, the point of this is, I mean, I'm here talking to you all today, and we talk about this collectively because I personally am selfishly tired of hearing about the staffing shortage in restaurants on the news. That's not good for any of us. I mean, whether we think that gives us some flexibility to be not as good as we are typically is kind of a joke. The fact that this reflects on the service industry, it's a problem no matter who you are, no matter what you do for a living. The fact that this currently reflects more heavily on the service industry makes me grumpy, because it shouldn't, because we have awesome jobs for people and we can collectively do better. That was a long lead into your question, Amy, but yes. Paul brought it up, and part of the challenge when I talk to other people about this is saying these things in a different way and saying them in a way that's hard. Because for a million years, what we all do and what we believe in this industry is that the customer is always right. The customer comes first, right? We've all heard that a million times. That is 1,000,000% not true anymore. And the more you can say out loud that your customers come literally before your employees, the more successful you will be. Sucks to say that, right?
No, you meant the other way around. You meant to say that the employees come way before.
Employees come first. Sorry, thank you, Paul. That's, yeah, appreciate you. But yes, the customer is not always right. The customer, there doesn't need to be a pecking order for this, but it is kind of an important conversation to have at this point in time, because we need to talk about it. And that's a great lead into how to talk about it. I'm going to request Amy off your schedule to some degree. Paul mentioned some of this also, but when we get back to Erin, I would love to hear her talk a little bit about how we should and should not refer to employees and why we should talk differently about people who are different generations, because she does a very good job explaining that in a sometimes humorous and some, I mean, none of it's humorous, but she explains that better than I do. But yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to say out loud, and the more we can collectively do it, the better off we'll be, because we do have good jobs for people and we can lead well. And restaurants, I mean, I remember when I joined the WRA board, what we talked about then, and this is 12 years ago with employment, was that restaurant jobs are great because they provide flexibility for people at times in their life when they might need them. And flexibility is a huge asset. And there are none of the things that have always been good about restaurant jobs went away. The market in general has shifted to the point where we have to probably, as leaders and owners, do a better job of representing that to our employees in order to keep competing and to keep being what we want to be, which is good stewards for our people and our communities, so on and so forth. Good? Make sense?
Yes.
Perfect. So we will move on to what you were just saying. We'll let Erin talk a little bit about how you should and shouldn't talk to employees. And I think she's also going to talk a little bit about expressions of gratitude. And I think that's all going to fall into the same slot here.
Okay. I wasn't prepared for this, but I can just go at it. So Chris and I have this thing where certain things kind of drive us nuts. I really get annoyed. I mean, listen, I used to do this, and so I can't really get that annoyed. I used to complain about my generation and the next generation. So I'm a millennial, and the next generation is Gen Z. We know this, right? Oh, millennials don't have the work ethic. You know, the Gen Z, they don't want to work anymore. Nobody cares. They don't even show up. Okay, maybe, but also the older generation always complains about the younger generation, right? My grandparents complained about my parents complained about me, and it's always going to be this way. So we always need to take that into account. What makes me crazy is when restaurant operators just say, I need bodies. You are dehumanizing people by saying you need a body. So I think that we need to change a lot of the rhetoric around how we talk about our employees. Like for me, it's even hard for me to say my employees, because it makes me feel like I'm above them, right? So we try to say our staff, our team, and it's something very basic, but it's words, and it changes how you feel about it, right? And it changes how they feel about you. The other thing that we say, and it's just words, rather than saying, oh, these people work for me, we always use the word with. So they work with us. Very basic, but it really changes how people talk about it. Chris, what are you thinking about specifically that I had said in the past that you want me to elaborate on?
That was sort of it. We collectively have this bad habit of saying that nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody does a good job. That I have an example, because we talk about this often. And it's nobody that anybody would know, but I was talking to a restaurant owner in a different state 4 years ago. This has been going on, as we all know, for a long time. None of this has to do with a pandemic necessarily or unemployment necessarily. So we've been having the conversation for a minute. So this was 4 or 5 years ago. I was talking to a gentleman, and he said something to the effect of, look, I hire all these kids and they come into my kitchen and nobody knows what to do anymore. And I spend all day yelling at them. And the other gentleman and I were sitting there, we just went, look, have you tried not yelling at them? I mean, there's nothing generational about that. He said, I can't get anybody to work, and all I do is yell at these people all day long. If we can stop collectively doing some of that, we'll all be better off. Because what you want is people to want to work in any restaurant, not necessarily Paul's explicitly. I mean, this isn't about competing for employees. We want folks to work in restaurants because they're awesome places to work. And the pervasive outgoing attitude is absolutely sometimes that these people don't want to work anymore. And that is just not true. Now, if you want to hold that belief and you want to yell about that all day long, see, now I'm getting ranty again. I told you I didn't want to do this, Aaron. I was going to be quiet.
But it's fun.
Well, it is. But I mean, if that's the attitude you want to have as an operator, and that's how you want to refer to people, that's great. It's going to continue to be difficult to find employees who want to work for you, because that's a bad way to start the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
See, you say it nicer than I do. That was my whole point.
No,
You
but
can say that politely, and I can't.
But I had to rope you into
I'll
it.
say it nicer than that.
No, I mean, you know, we have an approach within our organization. If, for example, an employee isn't performing, you know, we begin with the first question, which is, well, did they really let me down, or did I let them down first? And we have to own the fact that it's our job to make them happy in the environment and give them the tools. So, you know, did we train them right? Did we give them the tools to do their job? What obstacles are out there? How do we redirect, as Aaron said, the conversation about it, catching people doing stuff right, showing them that there's an upward mobility within the organization, showing them the diversity of, and I'm speaking about my business, you know, that there's so many different jobs. The fact that we have a maintenance crew, show those people respect, because when your stove is broken, someone shows up. Or when the air conditioning goes down, someone shows up. We're on a team. We take care of each other. We look out for each other. We build that camaraderie. And as an organization, we all reflect well upon each other. So to me, it's like, it's all these things that are sort of wound together, but it begins with leadership has got to set the tone at the top. And you know, Gene, you know, you're, I mean, servant leadership, maybe.
Oh, I think you froze there for a minute, Paul.
Is that you're not above
Paul,
anything.
you froze for a minute. Could you repeat, maybe rewind a little bit?
Well, you know, to the part about Gene, you know, we ask ourselves, you know, have we given them the tools to do their job? Have we trained them correctly? Are there any obstacles that we're unaware of? Do we know what's going on in their personal lives, so that without being intrusive, to see, is there something that's preventing you from? So when we have an issue with an employee, we look inward rather than look outward. We say, you know, how did we fail them first? And then, you know, listen, you can train all you want, responsibility and accountability. You can delegate certain responsibilities, but you cannot delegate accountability. They have to feel empowered. And so, you know, Steve Wynn, in my days at Wynn, massive organization, 12,000 employees, he had this idea that if you can make people feel good about themselves and the role that they play, whether you're, you know, a dishwasher, a pot washer, we are as good as our weakest link, right? So if a hostess is rude, forget about the manager or the chef. If the hostess or the dishwasher doesn't clean, all of these people are integral to this ballet that is the restaurant. And so no element is insignificant. Everyone is critical to this organization, and they all need to be respected at the same time. And they all need to see that there's an opportunity to grow. And Jean was mentioning before that I think is like really brilliant. Servant leadership is like maybe to excess, you know, because she's there 8 hours a day. You know, someone at her intellectual and skill level her time could be used maybe better, differently. But what she's telling everybody is that it is a one team, that she's not above doing anything, that she will lead by example. And over time, that's how you get buy-in, because I'm not the boss and you work. So when my brother and I started our company early on, we had an inverted pyramid, right? My brother and I were at the bottom, and at the top were the operators, and it was our job to support them. And what we learned as we grew as a company, we became more and more corporate, and all of a sudden we became at the top of the pyramid and we were managing down. And so even as short as a couple of years ago, we changed our name from corporate office to support office, because in the end, all the work that we do at an organizational level is to support the success. The players are on the field. I can't cook in every restaurant. I have great chefs. I can't serve or be the maitre d' in all the restaurants. It's up to them to do it. So how do we work to empower them to feel that sense of pride, that sense of ownership, that sense of belonging, that sense of team? And that is our job, is to support their success and to facilitate it and to eliminate as much friction and make it as easy as for them to feel that pride of ownership in their units. And it's something that my brother and I early on identified. We found ourselves getting a little more corporate, and literally this sort of COVID moment was really a reset for us to go back to the values that we founded on, which is, we're here to support your success. We're here to make you successful in your job. And we're here to have you share in the benefit of what we're doing through our gain sharing program and other things that we do in the company.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, as long as we have you here, you had mentioned too about when customers are in your restaurant, that there's a lot more to it than the food itself. You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we break our businesses down into 3 separate components. A third of it is environment, a third of it is in food and beverage offering, and a third of it is part of a lot of hospitality and, and really creating that sparkle in the employee so the guest feels like that we are nurturing that experience. The idea that it's just the food, no. Guests remember how they feel, and so do employees. So if we can make the employees feel good about themselves, then when that guest is in our environment, they're going to feel that there's someone that cares. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to overcook a steak. We're going to forget to put in a cocktail order. We're going to make a mistake. The pasta might be overcooked one day. We're human. People want to know that you care and that you're going to fix it, that they're valued. And when you have the employees that have this sense of pride about it, they feel terrible that they forgot to fire the cocktail order or that the chef overcooked or oversalted something. It's about taking accountability and that responsibility and owning it. And so that was a really big part of always been our culture. And so, are we wired to see the fuzzball in the corner in the environment? Are we all going, gee, is the temperature right? Is the music too loud? Is the lighting levels ready? Is the table wobbly? If we are obsessed about that attention to detail all the time, then it becomes a culture of excellence. And, Lombardi had it right. He said something to the effect that, perfection's unattainable, but if you go about it long enough, you'll stumble across, excellence. And so it is pursuit of excellence. And that's got to come from ownership and that sense of pride, but not, with a hammer. It's got to come with that commitment and that servant leadership and listening, like Aaron talks about, and redirecting. And Chris with the attitude that, hey, I'm going to give you all the tools. You're an independent contractor. You get out there. You're going to make people happy. I trust you. You're going to do right. And we're all, in our own way, believe in these values. We all do it differently and at different scale, but I'm really proud to be associated on this panel because even though we're all different kind of operators, I just think that we believe in the same values. We maybe exercise them slightly different, and we're all different realities, but it's just the most glorious business in the world. And our greatest challenge right now is that we have got to figure out, as time goes by, more and more how we can be better leaders and be better operators so that our employees, that we continue to draw the best people. It's up to us to create this environment as an industry that people want to work in. And for us to say it's the employees and it's not, no. Look in the mirror. It starts with us. It really starts with us. And if we're struggling, then we have to really ask ourselves, what could we do differently? How could we be better? How do we get better at getting better every day? That 1% better. What did you say? Better than yesterday. I love it. Each one of these things, as I'm listening, I write notes because I'm learning from other people. So I don't know. I love our business. I love being around people. And
Because it's all about the people, right?
it's all about the people. We're in the people business. We're not in the food and beverage. We're in the people business. And it's just, I love it. I love the camaraderie of our industry. I don't know what else, but I think it's about making people feel good, both your employees and then transferring that over to your guest. That's everything.
Thank you, Paul. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share that was missed, or maybe that you thought of? We can, if there's something, speak up now. Otherwise, we'll kind of move on if there's any questions. But is there anything any of you wanted to add? Erin's contemplating. Jeannie looks like she's pretty good. Chris is probably good. You have anything, Erin?
I mean, I have so much, but we should just
go for it. If you've got something else you want to share, go for it, and then we can move on to questions.
No, I mean, well, okay, fine. There's a lot to do, right? Especially if you're just kind of starting out with this sort of new mentality of, okay, I need to change things on my end in order to be able to attract more and better people. And so it's very overwhelming, especially at first. So several years ago, when we first sort of embarked on this journey, because we saw that labor was an issue, right? This isn't a new thing, as Chris mentioned. It was becoming a problem. And so we decided to look internally to figure out what we could do different in order to attract better people, more people. And it was very overwhelming because there were all of these different things that I needed to do. I mean, and expensive, right? So we were not paying that much however many years ago. And so since then, we've had a plan to 15. And so we've had a plan to be able to get to a guaranteed $15 base wage. And in order to do that, we had to really take a deep dive into our numbers and figure out how we could do that for our staff. And so we are there with the guaranteed minimum, and then they obviously get wage plus tips and things like that. But it took a lot in order to be able to make these incremental price increases. And then obviously, like with the costs that everybody is having issues with going up, you have to do it even more. But as Jeannie said, people are ready for that at this point. And especially if someone comes in, like we don't publicize it, but if someone does come in and say, oh, hey, why'd you raise your prices? If you let them know, like it's for our staff, it's not just going in our pocket. People are so understanding, they get it. But there's a bunch of little things, and you really need to take step by step. What can I do today? What can I do today? What can I do today? And try to make a positive change every day. Otherwise, it's just way too overwhelming. So what my husband and I do is we always feel like we're not doing enough, right? I feel like this is kind of a blessing and a curse of people who are just like ambitious and want to do everything. So we always write down the positive changes that we make. And then at the end of the year on New Year's, we'll go through and we'll see that there were literally hundreds of things that we did. And so then you really start to feel good about it, and you see the direction which your organization is going, not only from this list, but you're also looking at it like from a bird's eye view and seeing like how much positive change has been made in your organization. So anyway, the point is, don't get overwhelmed, take positive steps every day and talk to people who are doing it right, or righter, right? If you know someone who's not having issues and you are having issues, go and speak with them and say, hey, what are some techniques? What are you doing? And it's going to be probably 100 different things. So don't get overwhelmed with that. Just start doing one thing at a time.
Can I just add something?
Oh, you froze, Paul, so hang on a moment. You're still frozen. Okay, go ahead.
It was about employee retention, right? Or employee attracting employees. And we went through and we started going, well, we have to offer better health insurance. We need better, mental health providers to support people in a time that people have been traumatized by COVID. I mean, let's face it, it's been a difficult time for everyone, and everybody's manifesting this change differently, and we have to be very aware of that. And so, mental health provider became an issue, paying a living wage. When we made this list, servant leadership, encouraging, people to take PTO, Parking for some people is a big deal. Birthday service awards, appreciation of employees, checklists for everything. Erin talked in her thing, making sure that everyone had very clear expectations with really detailed checklists for everything. Great way to make sure people know that expectation and ensuring that you've trained it. High standards of pursuit of excellence was another one. Attitude and gratitude. You call them check-in days, Erin. In our company, we call them breakfast talks, where we have these feedback sessions where we really become listeners. And we went through all of this list, training, and giving the managers the tools. And we had autonomy as a topic, and the creating an environment where managers have decisions. But that was a lot of tactical things. And that's how we started our original talk. But what we ended with was the non-tactical part, which is the human part. And that isn't a tactical approach. That isn't a list of things you do to check the box to be an employer of choice. That is that mindset of, how do we get better? How do we become a better employee? What is the mindset that we can do to make and continually ask ourselves, how do we make this, our businesses or our industry, the industry of choice is what really, Chris got a little salty about, because he cares about his people. He wants his people to be happy. And by the way, if you want your life back, the best way to have a life in our industry is to empower people to help you do it together with the team approach. But it started with the tactical, what do we do in terms of the checklist? But what it shifted to was all that emotional quotient that is the part where people feel good and feel considered and feel important and feel like there's a development, a mentorship path, and that we're investing. To me, that's where it shifted. And that's the area where it isn't a.
Oh, you froze, Paul. Hang on.
Communicate with authenticity that that's what your values are. So.
Well, yes, that is a good place to, I'm going to excuse our Facebook Live audience. Thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to open it up here for a few minutes here. We're approaching 10 o'clock, but if anybody has any questions for anybody here, there is one that came up about a half hour ago, and it is, what are the similarities and differences, if any, between what is known as food safety culture and organizational culture?
That sounds kind of jargony, but in terms of food safety culture and organizational culture, I mean, they're two different things, but they obviously go hand in hand in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, so food safety culture to me, as a young chef, I worked in many places over in Europe and around the United States as well. And what I try to tell our cooks is, when we talk and do our food safety training and our chefs are mentoring, think about the intimacy and the trust that a guest gives us, that what you put in front of them, you're going to actually ingest into their body. Not to be inappropriate, but I don't think we take who we choose as our partners to be lightly, right? And yet we go to a restaurant and we allow someone to handle something that we're going to put into our body, like a physician would prescribe a medication or a procedure. So our job is to treat those guests with the utmost respect, and to treat the food with the respect that it deserves, because there is a certain level of inherent trust that a guest puts in us. Therefore, it's not only how clean we are, what our personal hygiene is, but the respect that we have for the food and the responsibility, the enormous responsibility that we carry, when we provide food that people are going to eat and drink in our restaurants. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. And we joke around.
Amy,
cleanliness is next to godliness, you know? And you guys are all gods in our kitchen. We've got to keep the place clean.
Erin, yes, Erin, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I see this question from Mike there. Do any of you use a mission statement or guiding principles to guide your ideal culture? And I want to pop in with that because I think that's super important. So for us, we have mission statements for the employees and then mission statements for guests, right? Because we have different missions with each of them. But the main things are our core values. So our core values are the lifeblood of our operation. So when we look at these things, it allows us to take a pulse of our operation. And this is something that we really harp on and we train it really well so that all of our staff can know and understand our core values and make it part of their mission too. So that's something that I think is really crucial, or at least it has been crucial to our success, is having these sort of common guiding factors, I guess we'll call it, that everybody is behind and everybody understands.
Thanks, Erin. We have a couple more questions, but I do want to be respectful of time for my panelists. So if any of you need to dash now that it's 10 o'clock, we all understand completely. So I want to just give you that invitation that if you need to jump off, please don't feel bad about doing that. And if that's the case, I'm hoping at least a couple of you can hang on because we're getting a lot of questions, but I just wanted to give you that opportunity. There was a question about tip pooling and kind of what your opinions are about that, particularly the fact that back of the house, often that's set, but the front of the house and how to handle that and camaraderie when it comes to that or lack of. Does anybody want to talk about that at all?
I can talk about that. Good question, Marla. I was going to mention, well, am I echoing everywhere? Or is it just here?
You're okay.
Yeah, good. You can, this really is a favorite subject, I think, of all of ours on here. Amy, if you have a way to share my email with the people who are on, that's fab. Anybody can ask questions anytime because I love to discuss this.
Sure.
Otherwise, since we're being recorded, at beckett'srestaurant.com, you can email me anytime there. But Marlo's question is a great one and ties in great with what Paul was just talking about, that you're going to find that we all have tactical items, and that's kind of why emails are good with this, because none of us, I think, mind sharing those things with other people, because raising the tide for everybody is a good thing for the industry at this point. But Marlo's question is one of my favorite, and one that we have, front of house, we've sort of reevaluated more recently than the rest of it, because like Erin, we've been working at this for a while, because staffing we knew was going to be an issue at some point in time. And it's not going to surprise anybody who's listened thus far, but we're really democratic with the way we schedule front of house staffing as well. So to Marlo's explicit question, yes, there are tip pooling stuff for different portions of what we do front of house, but broader stroke, what I found is really important and what helps to make the serving job better. And this is good for full service restaurants and not everybody, but we base front of house scheduling on what we can predict those folks will make per hour based on past revenue generated type of thing. So it's not necessarily about how many people I dictate are going to be on that night or how big a section might be. We are aiming for a price per hour in tips for those folks. And that's how we base the schedule. So that's number one. But secondarily, and what we've changed most recently is our front of house staffing is a democratic process in that there is a fine line, of course, where not everybody wants to run around sprinting all night long to make as much money as possible. This is still supposed to be fun. So front of house staff has every opportunity at any given point in time to say we need more people on or less people on based on how they want that shift to go for themselves. Because there's a huge difference. I mean, I'm sure everybody on this panel, everybody listening has worked in a restaurant as a server at some point in time. There are nights where you would prefer to make slightly less money to work slightly, not less hard, but to have less stress. And we found that opening up that discussion front of house wise to a broader pool of people, and primarily the people who are literally doing it, and not just me, the manager, who does what, that's been massively beneficial to the way we feel as a front of house staff going forward.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I've worked in both individual tiered programs where each unit does it individually. as well as pooled rooms in New York City, as well as union and pooled in Las Vegas at Wynn. So I've seen sort of all different ways to do it. It's interesting because whatever one you're currently working with, it typically has the idea that the grass is always greener, that there's a better way to do it, right? And so each one of those, whether it's individual or pooled, Danny Meyer came out with a service fee. So I worked in Europe where there was no tipping at all. You pay the bill, and then everyone worked for a salary or a wage. I think our system is better because, and so Danny Meyer, began down that road, and there was a lot of publicity about it. He's kind of walking back a little bit these days because it didn't really work. There's clearly a disparity between the amount of money that a cook makes and a server. So, clearly the check average has not kept pace for the operations with a lot of the pay rates. And what we're seeing Gene doing and some other people is moving their check average up and saying, if you're delivering on your promise of excellence in service, you can then increase and make a more competitive wage for your cooks in the kitchen. So I've worked in all three. There isn't one elan or one perfect way to do it. Every business model is a little bit different. I've seen many of them. And as I said, I look at this as if there's a way that we can do it better, we're open to that. But I also think that when you deal with, tipped employees and their monies, part of it is law and part of it is the culture that you built within your organization.
Thank you. How about, there's a question about adjusting menus when it comes to chain supply issues, inflation, any solutions there?
I have one. Raise your prices. So we have done a lot of cost price analysis this year, and we've raised our prices 3 different times out of necessity, but only as much as we've needed. So we've really broken down every single food item line by line to figure out, okay, pitas went up by this much, and I only need to raise the price by 3 cents in order to account for that cost. So, just really breaking it down, and don't be afraid to raise your prices because it's something that you have to do. You can't put yourself out of business. Now, obviously, you don't want to be greedy about it, and I can't take a euro from $9 up to $15 because I want to pocket the extra cash, right? So just do what you have to do, and then also account for those whenever we do this, whenever we look at our food, which is just every couple of months at this point when we're looking at raising prices. Not all the time, right? But we have to analyze this every few months. We're also looking at those numbers and incorporating raises in for our staff too whenever we have these price adjustments.
Thank you, Erin. Unless anything else comes up here in a moment, I think we will conclude